And breaking news coming in, an Army Court of Inquiry has recommended court-martial proceedings against 168 personnel of an artillery regiment, 226 field regiment, for that May 2012 clash between jawans and officers at the Mahe field firing range in Ladakh. And this includes 4 officers, including the commanding officer, Colonel Prasad Kadam. Others are JCOs and jawans of this RT regiment. This is one of the largest cases of disciplinary action in a court-martial to be court-martialed ever. This is practically half of that battalion, half of that regiment which will be court-martialed. The CO, 3 other officers, 200 odd JSOs and jawans. There was an intense standoff between the officers and jawans. In fact, jawans went to the courts, they withdrew weapons and they beat up officers. This was one of the most embarrassing cases in the Indian Army of an officer jawan face-off that happened in Ladakh, where some officers actually fled their regiment location. And let me bring in headlines today's Deputy Editor Defense for more on this. Shiv, take us through the details. You've accessed that Court of Inquiry report. Take us through the details.
A pretty elaborate recommendations being made there, Gaurav. 168 personnel, including 4 officers of the 226 Field Regiment, will face disciplinary action, which of course, could involve a court-martial and them being, removed from service for that incident in May last year, which we covered at great length and in great detail here on Headlines Today. Remember, it was in May at the Mahe field firing range during your field artillery practice that there was a major incident where a particular jawan was apparently beaten up by a couple of other officers. Murky details about what really happened. As you remember very clearly, there was a massive clash where the jawans of the 226 regiment actually almost took control of the entire unit. They gherawed the officers' mess. Some of the officers had to actually leave the unit. Some of them actually fled away from the unit, taking unit vehicles with them. It was an extremely serious incident at that time. It was near mutiny. That's what the report had actually called it, the preliminary report. Now, this inquiry has taken a very long time, Gaurav, where each of those individuals have been questioned. The police has been involved in Leh because a complaint was actually filed by certain officers with the police in Leh as well. And all of these have come together in this inquiry recommendations that has said that Colonel Prasad Kadam, the commanding officer of the unit,
yes,
plus 3 other officers and 164 JCOs and jawans will face disciplinary action. Definitely one of the most disturbing incidents in the Army's record so far.
It indeed has been, and let me bring in Headlines Today's Shuja ul Haq, who joins me from Srinagar for more on this story. Shuja, you've been speaking to your sources. What have you been able to pick up?
Well, Gaurav, this incident which took place in April 2012, today we've run from the armed sources in the Army Corps here that around 17 JCOs and 147 jawans will be taken to charge when it comes to the punishment that has been announced. And also the commanding officer and 3 other officers have also been found guilty of discipline and will be charged under disciplinary action. Clearly, it has taken a lot of time. The incident took place in 2012 April, and the Army inquiry took a lot of time. But yes, a lot of people in the Corps themselves feel that better late than never. This was an incident which has clearly shook the entire rank and file of the Army. The way it had happened when jawans.
Indeed, this indeed was one of the most embarrassing situations that the Army has ever faced. The preliminary report called it a near mutiny. Shiv, this report also perhaps recommends what the Army should do to ensure something like this never happens again. There were initial reports that suggested that several officers had their lady wives with them at the field firing range, and perhaps something like this should never be permitted again.
Absolutely, Gaurav. Remember, when this incident took place, the Army was very distracted at that time with the entire age controversy. It was just a couple of weeks before the change of guard at the very top of the Army, and therefore, actual action had to wait for a few weeks before it actually filtered down. Because remember, the report had basically found that there was a complete breakdown of leadership. Several people had thrown complete caution to the wind. Discipline had been given the go-by, and the law had been taken into their own hands as far as the entire structure was concerned. There was a great deal of disenchantment within, within the soldiery that was completely apparently ignored by the officer class of this particular unit, and this may have spilt over into other units as well, as a result of which the army cracked down very hard, and that's why they've taken such hard measures. On the ground, as per units, several advisories, several instructions have been sent out about counseling, about sensitization, about unit level counseling, and this commanding officer keeping in touch with the jawans and their concerns. Remember, this isn't the first time it's happened, Gaurav.
Yes.
This has happened over a number of times, and not just for incidents of this kind. Also, pertaining to suicide, to fratricide, to other kinds of concerns. So it's basically a reiteration of what the army has always told its units: be sure that you always have your pulse on the soldiery, because they are your power.
Indeed, Shiv Arur and Shujaul Haq, many thanks for joining me. We'll track this story very closely.